Hello and welcome to India Today Global. I am Pranay Upadhyaya. Global conflicts have gone up and so is defense spending. With recent Operation Sindoor, India has also started ramping up the defense preparedness, and with a lot of indigenous military projects and indigenous military spending are going up. What are these developments? What are the indications? We are trying to break up and help you understand that what India is doing and where the Indian defense spending is being invested. I'm being joined by senior defense journalist Sandeep Unnithan. Welcome to India Today Global, Sandeep.
Good to be back, Pranay.
And as we always try and understand with your help, what India is doing. Recently, if you see, the Defense Acquisition Council has cleared the project worth 1 lakh crore with the induction of 2 new military naval frigates, with the new quad at sea military, the Naval Observation Center, with the new warhead for Agni-V missile.
Yeah.
What are we doing? What are we preparing for?
Well, preparing for conflict clearly, Pranay, and to keep the powder dry, and you're faced with a unpredictable adversary on your western borders, and he's now being assisted by China to our north. So you're talking of a collusive threat, a two-front threat. What the Indian military has always been preparing for seems to have manifested itself. While China is not directly involved in fighting with India, it is certainly resourcing Pakistan. It's giving Pakistan arms supplies, hardwares, and most importantly C4ISR, command, control, intelligence, reconnaissance. All of those support is being given to Pakistan to make the Pakistani military machine more lethal, and to ensure that India is always firewalled in South Asia fighting Pakistan, just the way that it wants Russia to continue fighting NATO, because they want to ensure that the West and NATO does not focus on China. And here in East Asia, they want North Korea to ensure that South Korea and Japan are always held in check by Kim Jong-un. So it is China's strategy largely, Pranay, that we have to look at. But so for India, if you thought that we were looking at an era of peace and no war and no conflicts and all that, well, conflicts have arrived at our doorstep, and it is for us to prepare.
We recently had a conflict. Sandeep, this is an absolutely fantastic primer for our viewers to understand. But let us try and break down. If you see 10 projects worth over 1 lakh crore, if you see the armored recovery vehicle or the electronic warfare system, integrated common inventory management system, surface to air missile, moored mines, mine countermeasure vessel, help our viewers to understand what are these projects. Some of these projects are long pending projects.
Yes, absolutely, Pranay, and many of these projects have been in the pipeline for decades, not just years, for decades. And towards the end of your list, you've spoken about mine countermeasure vessels, NCMVs. Now, this is a project that's been on for almost 2 decades. 2 decades. What is an MCMV basically? It is a vessel with GRP hull, a non-magnetic hull, usually about 800 to 1,000 tons, light, small vessels, which are basically meant to hunt mines which are planted in and around ports and harbors and coastlines and all that. So mines are basically large explosives with timers or various triggers which explode when they come close to a warship or a merchant ship. So this is to ensure that our adversaries don't mine our harbors and coastlines and all that. Now the fact is that Indian Navy had coastal minesweepers, it had ocean-going minesweepers, and because of the delay in acquiring these new platforms, it has had to decommission all its old mine vessels, mine countermeasure vessels, with the result that today we don't have a single MCMV in service. They've all been retired. So this is an old project. So, many projects.
It's a critical deficiency.
It is a very critical deficiency, Pranay, because, mine warfare is something that the Indian Navy did in 1971. They, used it to devastating effect. Of course, it was part of a covert operation, which I had the good fortune of writing about in my second book, Operation X. But, the fact is that we never thought that this kind of warfare would be used against us, but we are increasingly seeing this kind of asymmetric warfare being used by the Houthis, by Iran, by all these other so-called non-state actors, and it's a very real danger that tomorrow our adversary or the West might try something similar with us. He's as unpredictable, as countries get.
And with 7,500 kilometer long coastline, we have to be very mindful about these challenges.
And particularly given our excessive reliance on the oceans, we need the oceans to be open for freedom of navigation and for our energy supplies to come in, for our trade, for our import and exports. All of that, it's extremely critical that the oceans be kept open and no blockades be imposed on us. So that's the reason that you have very critical capabilities like mine countermeasure vessels, moored mines in case you want to do the same to your adversary. They're looking at acquiring a large number of moored mines. Though, I mean, personally, I think the moored mine is a concept it's an ancient concept. It's something from the Second World War. I mean, a moored mine is something that it's a mine that's moored to the bottom, as the name suggests, that, and it pops up when it comes. It's moored by a cable, and it pops up when a ship is in the vicinity, target ship, and it explodes, destroying the vessel or the merchant ship, as the case may be. But we are looking at very advanced mines that the DRDO has developed.
But the list also includes, Sandeep, the submersible autonomous vessels. Like, underwater UAV. So,
this is basically an underwater version of a UAV. And these are various in shapes and forms and sizes that you have these as UUVs, underwater unmanned vessels. You have them as gliders, which are extremely long range, drones, which actually literally fly under the surface of the ocean for days on end. So, gone are the days when you would want an entire crewed submarine to be sitting there, carrying out spying missions or mining missions or ambushing enemy warships when hostilities break out. You can do all of these tasks using machines, robots like gliders, and so that's a very big step for the Indian Navy to acquire.
There are two important components, like I want you to help us understand and break it down. One is surface to air missile. In Operation Sindoor, we have seen, it has emerged as a very
Operation Sindoor, Pranay. It is a groundbreaking military operation. The 70 hours that we saw this conflict, exactly 2 months ago, incidentally, it's the first time that you had non-contact warfare, where you had both adversaries not crossing the international boundary and firing missiles, drones, hypersonic missiles from standoff distances. You're not crossing borders, but at the same time, because of you have the precision guided munitions, you have air to ground munitions, you have supersonic cruise missiles, you're able to target the enemy, inflict great damage on his air bases and his terror training camps of the kind that India carried out. 11 air bases, 9 terrorist training camps and launch pads.
What kind of surface to air missiles we are looking at?
So you would be looking at primarily Akash, you'd be looking at Akash-NG, the next generation version of the Akash, possibly more man-pads, that is shoulder fired. So this was the era of missile warfare.
Because our like OSA AK and Iglas are old.
They need to be replaced. So a lot of missiles are going to be bought, Pranay. And
what is the status of VSHORADs?
VSHORADs, well, you're looking at buying a certain number of VSHORADs off the shelf from the Russian Federation, which is the OSA, the Iglas. And you will also have the DRDO, basically making a bulk of them indigenously. So that's a very capable DRDO program for called the VSHORADs, which should be entering service, in the next couple of months. So that's a good program. But this is the era of missile warfare.
It's basically the very short range air defense system.
So it's a man-pad, missile. It's like the Igla or the Stinger missile the Americans use. So it's very capable. It's got its. I mean, obviously it's not a very long range system. It's about 7 to 8 kilometers, but in certain areas they're very effective, like in mountain tops or valleys. If you're on certain areas from which the adversary is going to come in, you would position people with man.
Also, besides the missiles, the list also includes electronic warfare system.
Yes.
We have seen that during Operation Sindhu, how electronic warfare has become a very important component of battlefield.
It is always been a part of the battlefield, but in times like this, non-contact warfare, it becomes extremely critical when you want to jam the enemy's missiles, you want to jam the enemy's platforms, you want to ensure that your platforms don't get jammed. So EW systems are extremely powerful, very important, critical components of the battlefield. So, Pranay, this list is some of the items that you mentioned and which we just spoke about have been in the pipeline for decades, right? There are some
you absolutely mentioned
which
about
are
the
urgent
delays
and critical requirements.
So what timeline we are looking at? The different DAC, it's in AON. We know the process that AON, then DAC,
so
and then
it's
RFI,
important.
RFP.
It's important to note that these are not final contracts. These are acceptance of necessity, which means that the government recognizes the need for the armed forces to have all of these capabilities, all of these platforms, all of these systems. Now, that is the very first rung of a long series of steps that the Defense Ministry and the services have to climb before you can actually initial the contract and then finally take delivery. Now, this system...
Now, the service headquarters have to formulate the GSQR,
the
and
service headquarters have to formulate the GSQRs, then they will have to call for requests for information. The request for information, once it's received, then they become requests for proposals, where you ask the companies to give
OEMs or equipment manufacturers.
Original equipment manufacturers to provide you concrete proposals, which you then trial in the field. You conduct field trials, you have summer trials, you have winter trials, and then you get into
So we are looking at a staggered timeline of maybe 2 years, 3 years, 5 years.
If all goes well, Pranay, this AON could be translated into a contract in about 4 years' time, right? If all goes well. So you're looking at something like 2029. A majority of these could be could become contracts, and then they could be orders could be placed, and the deliveries would begin.
But since our process is complex, so we have to prepare, we have to factor in all these things and initiate.
The biggest problem, Pranay, is that the fact that we have not been able to speed up our acquisition process. We have one of the slowest acquisition processes in the world, and it is never about money. The money is always there, but we find that
similar frustration was expressed recently by the Air Chief Marshal AP Singh.
Everybody is
he also said that.
And none other than about 6 months back, you had the Defense Secretary, Mr. R.K. Singh, saying that, look, I am very appalled by the rate at which we are, our processes. It takes years, 7, 8 years, and in cases like this mine countermeasure vessels, it's been on for 2 decades.
But on the positive side, Sandeep, recently we have seen certain acquisition going with speed as well.
Yes.
The financial powers of the service headquarters have been improved.
They've been
increased.
Yes, and all that has happened. I mean, there is a lot of there are a lot of positives in what we've been seeing in the last couple of years. Like I say that I've been covering defense here in Delhi for 2 decades, 20 years, right?
Absolutely.
From 2005.
Yes.
I have seen more movement in the last 5 years than I have seen in the previous 15 years, right? The rate of reform is fantastic. It's breakneck speed.
We have seen those ages of CBI inquiries and all the entire projects being scrapped. The acquisition processes being scrapped.
You've seen a reform, historic reform, the kind that you've not seen before, where you had those 39 ordnance factories, the Ordnance Factory Board, being broken up, restructured as corporations. Stuff like that has happened. But at the same time, you realize that because this Defense Ministry has not been modernized or reformed in about 50 or 60 years, there's an enormous backlog of reforms that have to be carried out. And this is just a systemic problem. And there are organizations that need to be created, specialist organizations. And since you're talking about AONs and all that being granted, you need specialist bodies of experts who will sit and negotiate contracts, who will carry out trials, do all of that. You have agencies in foreign countries, in France, in the United States, whose only job, the entire department, whose only job is to acquire weapons. They are weapons acquisition specialists. They do nothing but
Absolutely.
that throughout their entire careers. Whereas in our case, we haven't invested enough in creating weapon specialists, contract specialists, people who can negotiate contracts, all of that. The fine nitty-gritty.
We also have an office designated for the defense acquisition. Yeah, DG acquisition.
So we have a DG acquisition.
There,
we have all of those things.
Yeah.
But you're not staffing. You're not investing in manpower. You're not creating that cadre of specialists who can pick up contracts and run with it, and and execute something in like 3-4 years. There are issues with that, and the thing is that
I agree with you, Sandeep. But let's move on to other major decisions which has come, and these are the decisions which we are talking about taken and for the long-term acquisition. But certainly, in last 1 week, two important inductions happened, like INS Tamal and INS Udaygiri.
Right.
Two modern frigates inducted, and INS Tamal is capable of all 4-dimension warfare, like surface, air, underwater, and electromagnetic as well. Help our viewers to understand what kind of capability it adds to our naval warfare.
Well, absolutely. In fact, the two frigates that you just mentioned, the Tamal, which is about nearly 4,000 tons, it's a Russian-built frigate, and the Navy says that it's going to be the last foreign-built warship that they will acquire. The Tushil was acquired before that last year, and this year you have the Tamal, and you have two more ships of a similar class that are being built at the Goa shipyard through transfer of technology. Now, it's an extremely capable warship. It carries a helicopter, anti-submarine helicopter, or a radar picket helicopter, and of course, it's got a variety of missiles. It's got anti-aircraft missiles. It's got long-range land attack cruise missiles, the BrahMos cruise missiles. It's got
naval version
of and land attack versions as well. It's got fast-firing AK-630 cannons. It's got a very capable, surface search radar. It's got electronic warfare systems, anti-submarine torpedoes. It is a combatant that's capable of fighting warfare across 3 dimensions. It can attack targets under the water, on the surface of the ocean, and in the air above, and of course a 4th dimension if you're looking at land. So it's like 4 dimensions, not 3. So extremely capable platform. You have the INS Udaygiri, which is part of the Nilgiri class of frigates. A very capable line of frigates that's going to be inducted successfully.
And part of the project 17 Alpha.
17 Alpha frigates, which are stealth frigates, which again carry the kind of hardware that I just described. A little heavier, 5,000 tons plus frigates. But the Tamal is part of a class of, they were actually light frigates when they were in the Soviet
Krivak class.
The Krivak class, the light frigates, they were guard ships, but we have kind of loaded so much on them. We got the Russians to put in so much of hardware, and Russians being Russians, they specialize in packing a lot of heavy ordnance and equipment onto smaller platforms like the missile boats in the 71 war. So here they had, they've created a frigate which is extremely powerful surface combatant. It could be, in fact, it could be called a pocket destroyer even. It's that powerful. So you have the Udaygiri, which would come in, and the Navy is extremely conscious of the fact that you're looking at China, which is already the world's largest navy in terms of in number of combatants. 350 plus combatants is what they have, surface ships and combatants, and they're building them at a breakneck speed. So the calculation is that the PLA Navy adds 1 Indian Navy every decade.
Is that so?
That is a sheer number of. They're literally running everything on an assembly line. They're producing nuclear submarines at the rate of 3 and 4 a year, every year. We have taken about 3 decades to produce 4 nuclear submarines.
Are they looking at having submarine in every sea on this planet?
Absolutely. They want to take the United States head on. So they are a near peer adversary of the United States, and they plan to contest and challenge the United States. In every
so far
ocean,
the largest and the biggest, mightiest
Navy, which the US Navy basically inherited the role that the Royal Navy performed until the early 20th century. The Soviet Navy, while it tried, could never really challenge the US Navy in every ocean of the world. They did a couple of very significant exercises, but they never got the economic might that would allow them to project power in a way that the PLA Navy is able to do now. Now, the fact is that while the PLA Navy is looking at the whole world, they want to project their warships across the first island chain and the second island chain and all that. It has implications for India as well, because it's not going to be very far into the future when they will
But
start
very interesting part of
Indian Ocean
this
squadrons.
induction, Sandeep, is that the indigenization,
Yes.
the role of Majgaon Dock Limited,
Yeah.
the GRSC.
Yes.
So they have contributed a lot, and the way they have packed up these these stealth frigates.
True. There can be no doubt of the fact that we're very good at shipbuilding, but there is also another flip side to this, Pranay, and it's really important that we understand the problems here. Our viewers should not get lulled into any false sense of security. The fact that we are building warships, yes, we are building a lot of indigenous warships. They will all be built in India, but the problem again is with the propulsion. Exactly like you have the LCA with a foreign engine, and we're struggling now because of supply chain issues.
The turbines.
The turbines. You exactly have the same problem with our warships, which are which use foreign gas turbines.
Yes.
Right. Both the Nilgiri class and the Tushil and the Tamal, the Trivak class, they're using imported gas turbines. Now that is a very serious problem, because our gas turbine manufacturer for these frigates is the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians. They are making. There's a company called Zorya Mashprojekt which makes all our gas turbines, and Ukraine is a country that's at war. So we will have to depend on countries that.
So the supply line constraint,
which would actually impose constraints on our supply line. There is possibly nothing that you can do in the short term. That is a challenge with the Soviet legacy. Yeah, that's a challenge, of course, but I think that these are legacy issues. Pranay, we should have actually put in a lot more energy and focus on them decades ago.
Absolutely.
There's no point in talking. These are not problems you can solve in 6 months or 1 year or 2 years.
Because Soviet Union disintegrated in 1991. So it's been like,
And we continue with the legacy of the importing gas turbines. But now it's really important when you're looking at India becoming, say, the third largest economy by the end of this decade, self-sufficient in defense needs. You cannot be dependent on foreign countries for your gas turbines, for your warships, for your
fighter jet engines,
for your fighter jet engines.
Yes.
These are projects that you must push in at the very earliest, and to ensure that you're
and we have been struggling with this problem for long, like be it the Kaveri engine project or like the other engine projects. We have been struggling.
Yeah. So that remains our Achilles heel. So it's really important that we realize that yes, we are building our own warships. They are excellent warships. They are second to none. But when it comes to truly becoming Aatmanirbhar, we need to figure out those engines and, of course, some of the sensors as well, which are being imported. So
but let's talk about some other Aatmanirbhar achievement, which is the Agni-V program.
Yes.
A recent decision by the Ministry of Defense been announced that India is soon be developing the 7,500 kilogram warhead for the deep underground strike. Especially this decision has come at a time when US has carried out the airstrikes with MOP bombs. Are we looking at some deep underground strike, or what kind of capability we are building at, like 7,500 kilogram warhead for Agni-V missile, and that to be with a shorter range, like 2,500 kilometer range?
So the Agni-V, as you know, is a strategic weapon carrier. It was designed. It's our longest range missile. It flies to over 5,500 kilometers. It's a 50-ton missile. It carries an enormous warhead of about 4 tons. But the sense here seems to be that we don't have the capability to target deeply buried underground targets like command posts, and some very, very important headquarters that could be buried deep underground.
What limited information we could access about this project is that we are looking at striking any facility which is like 80 to 100 meter underground.
Very deep underground targets, and we know for a fact that some of our adversaries in the north, the Chinese for instance, would not build anything on the surface. All of their command posts are buried underground, so if you want to target those, you would need something like a GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, which we don't have because we don't have the bombs, we don't have the bombers,
the platforms,
the B-2 bombers. So what we do have is a long-range missile that has the capability of lifting a very heavy load, especially if you curtail the range of the missile. So instead of a 5,500 kilometer range missile, if you fire it to a 2,500 kilometer range, a shorter range, which is the minimum range of the Agni-V missile, you could carry a heavier warhead.
Okay.
So that seems to be the understanding. Like, for instance, the Russian Oreshnik, which is a version of the Russian Federation's IRBM, the exact
intermediate
name.
range ballistic
An
missile.
intermediate range ballistic missile, like the Agni-V, which
Yes.
actually they've chopped it up into a shorter range missile, which will carry conventional warheads, which will allow the Russians to target a range of very important targets, not just buried under the ground, but also on the surface.
So with a shorter range, we could hit at a distance with carrying a heavier warhead.
Heavier warhead, and two types of warheads are under development, I'm told. The first is the fuel air explosive, which is which is a warhead that will go there and create a gas cloud, which will then be ignited by secondary explosion, and that enormous pressure that's going to be generated by that gas cloud expanding and exploding will create an effect something similar to the massive ordnance airburst round, which is a GBU 43, which the US used in Afghanistan in 2017.
Mother of all bombs.
Mother of all bombs. That's what
This is what they call.
they call it. So we are looking at two warheads. One that could replicate the MOAB, that's a GBU 43. A second warhead that could replicate the massive ordnance penetrator or the GBU 57, which could strike deeply buried targets. So Agni-V with two conventional warheads. The first one, I'm told, is in development. It's been tested, the fuel air explosive version. The second one remains to be tested, the deep penetrator, the massive ordnance penetrator variant of the Agni-V. But as and when it's tested, it'll be very interesting. Obviously, it won't be tested using the Agni-V missile itself. It will be independent warhead tests. The DRDO has a special
Also, if you can
lab.
give update, if you have, about the MIRV version of Agni-V.
The MIRV version of the Agni-V would essentially mean something like
a cluster bomb kind of
carrying about four warheads. It would carry four nuclear warheads, which means that one missile would have the ability to strike at four different targets. So it's like 1 into 4. That is the destructive power
as we
of
say
that
in
one
Hindi,
single.
in Hindi, that ek teer se kai nishan hai.
Ek teer se kahi nishan, that would be the aim of that. But the Agni's got a MIRV version as well, and increasingly they are looking at MIRVing many other missiles as well. The Agni-6, for instance, that's also going to be a MIRVed missile. The S6, which is the my mistake, sorry, the K6.
K6,
The K6, which is a submarine-launched ballistic missile, is also going to be a MIRVed missile, which is going to have. Sagarika was the earlier version of that, of a short version of that 750 kilometer range missile was called the Sagarika. The K6 is the most advanced version, which is going to be equipping the 12,500 ton S5 class SSBNs.
Yes.
As and when they enter service in the mid 2030s, which is again a decade from now.
Thank you very much, Sandeep, for helping our viewers to understand what does it mean for all these development, the defense acquisition, how India is trying to ramp up and speeding up the Aatmanirbhar defense projects. So thank you for watching this video, and if you have any question for Sandeep, do let us know in the comment box, and we will try and help you understand that what all these defense projects are about, and if you are interested in any specific defense equipment, then also let us know. Thank you very much.